Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Jody.
And today we are in my backyard in Harrisville with Nick Colony of Harrisville Designs. So thank you so much for being here. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about what you guys do in this building. So you want to tell us what the building is and sort of when it was built and what it's used for?
Harrisville Designs was started in 1970-71 by my dad. Most of the woolen industry companies had gone out of business at that time, so when my dad came out of college to help his dad with his woolen business, all the businesses were failing. He thought, well, I got a great idea, why don't I start a new one? So I kind of commend him for his courage in kind of starting a company in a very much a dying industry. So 41 years later, we're still here, I'm happy to say.
Yeah.
So,
and you've just come, you said you've moved back from Boston to help your dad with the business. And so mostly what goes on in this building here is that, you know, you get the wool and then it's spun. I mean, I think you're going to take us on a tour. We'll get to see that. But just a little synopsis. So when we go in, what are we expecting to see?
Well, I'll take you through exactly what will happen when we get the raw stock in through the warehouse. We'll go in through the picking process, the carding process, the spinning process, the twisting process, the washing process, the scanning, and the coning. So we'll see all of that today.
Oh, that's great.
There's a lot to it.
There is a lot to it.
Think about that. The way that I learned about this is because I took a weaving course at Harrisville Designs about 10 or 15 years ago, and we took a tour here, and I thought, oh my God, I don't know where this is. You go down this little dirt road, and here we are, boom, there's the spinning mill. But I really think you're going to find this so interesting because, you know, we don't know where any of this stuff comes from. You know, we wear these clothes, we eat this food, we do all these things, but we don't know how is it made and how does it come to be a sweater. So
well, and my big example is that my son is currently taking a knitting class at school, and so he just, you know, do you have any yarn? And you don't really think about where that came from, and so today we're going to learn about that, which is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So shall we head on in?
I think that sounds like a great idea. This is going to be so much fun.
All right.
Wow. You just want to touch it all.
I know. So what is this? I assume is like right off of the sheep.
It is,
right?
and this is rug yarn. So we do a lot of custom spinning for companies. This happens to be a rug yarn project that we do. You can see a lot of the natural fibers. How can you tell that it's rug yarn?
It
actually has to do with the micron inside the fiber. So depending on the number micron is about how wide the fiber is itself.
Okay, so that's the width of the individual fiber.
Correct.
Okay.
So can you tell just by looking at it, or do you have to look at it under a microscope, or what do you have to do? Or
yeah,
feel it?
You actually do look at it kind of more in depth under a microscope. And when we get samples at the office, my dad will actually sit down and look at it. He won't read the micron, but he'll take kind of the broker's word for it. So
now, is this off of a different, like a particular kind of sheep or a different place on the sheep?
Yeah, the rug yarn tends to come from sheep that have a little bit more coarser wool. You don't need it to be neck soft and you know, like our merino is, or any of the other softer yarns. So it's really great for rugs. You know, you don't have to worry about it being super soft or, you know, it's strong, it's durable, it's going to last over time. It's a little harder on the machines. Some of the people here don't like running it as well as they like running our merino. Yep. But it's an important part of our business, and we do quite a bit of custom lots for people.
So when you get it, it's clean. This looks pretty clean. How did people clean their wool before they got it to you?
It goes through a scouring process. And my dad was saying that when the Cheshire Mills were here in Keene and Harrisville, there were 14 scouring plants in New Hampshire. There are none now. So the nearest one, I think, is in Texas.
So they have to send this to Texas?
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's just the industry there's a very big carbon footprint of moving the wool around just because the industry is pretty well not there.
Right.
But there's a resurgence going on, and I think there's a lot more people raising sheep, and there's a lot of domestic need now.
Yep.
We would love to have a domestic line if there were more in demand. One of our biggest customers actually has domestic wool here, and he's got a really nice product too. So it's encouraging.
Yeah.
So this is will then be spun here, and we'll see that. And then will the actual rug be produced here, or then you ship it to whoever's using it to then buy for that rug they're making?
Yep, none of the weaving is actually done on site. This is all the area that the yarn is being spun to do the weaving. So traditionally, the weaving was done in Harrisville by Cheshire Mills at a time, but now we do most of our custom work for professionals, rug weavers, knitters, hand spinners, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have lots of different colors. I noticed in some of the bins, and we'll show some of those pictures along the way. But it's just incredible. I can't imagine all the different styles of yarns and the colors and the textures. There's just so much to this. So I think what we should do is we should probably head inside and take a little tour. And Nick, you can send us through the whole process.
Sure.
Okay.
Great. Let's head on
We'll
in.
see you on.
Right here we have our vacuum stripper, and that's responsible for cleaning up the card and taking all of the stock that's built up on the card, collects it all into this area, we bale it, and then we send it out to be reused.
Wow. Beautiful.
So over here we have the picking room, and when the raw stock comes in, it's scoured and dyed, and then we blend it here to make the heathered colors that we're known for. So right here you have some raw stock. This happens to be our orange. And as you can see in this process, it's all matted down. So it's very dry, there's no oil in it, the lanolin's been stripped out. So it's very dry at this point and it's very compressed. So to start the process, we have to pick it to open up the fibers. And once the fibers are opened up, we then oil it so it has a consistent natural oil throughout the product, and then we do the mixing right here in the picker as well. Okay, so the raw stock comes into this hopper. There's a spike apron inside that runs on a conveyor. It carries the fleece up in a uniform way. The arm at the top of the picker scrapes down and opens the fiber up. So once it's finished being opened up, it goes around the conveyor and lands on the other side of the apron where it's oiled, and it runs through the actual picker, which is on the other side underneath this hood. There's a series of cylindrical spikes inside there.
I can see those.
And you can see that's where really the picking's happening.
Yep.
And the force of it going around creates almost a vacuum. So it goes into this hood, and then the wool actually goes up above, and you can see it going in through this piping, and we have a series of bays here to separate the lots. So when we're running a certain lot, we'll move it over to the bin, and on the other side of this wall we have our cards. So depending on where we're going to run this stuff, we're going to have it on one side or the other.
So now you said something about oiling it.
Yep.
What is the oil that you use? What is it?
It's mostly natural. They use this type of olive oil, I believe, originally. I'm not sure what we're using at this point, but essentially the way that it works is once it's been scoured, all the oil's gone. We want to put the oil back onto it in a uniform way. So we have a hose at the top here that will spray it onto the raw stock. And when it goes up into here, it's all mixed around. Think about buttering popcorn, kind of. You want it all over it so it's nice and even.
Uniformity, yeah.
Yep, it'll make it run better on the card.
Because you do feel a little bit of an oily texture when you do touch wool in a sweater or anything like that.
Yep, and it's important for knitters as well. We wash all of our skeins to kind of make it, because you don't want that oil in there. For weaving, it's okay because you want to wash it and full it. But for knitting, you don't want to wash it and have your sweater get weird, because it will do that if you don't wash it.
Yep. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, we've got a lot more to go, so follow us. You've probably seen the small carders where somebody just takes something and it looks like little hooks, and they go like this together and it pulls the strands apart. Well, this is a huge carder, and Nick's going to tell us a little bit more about this.
So as you can see right now, Jimmy's loading up the hopper. This has been through the picker, so it's been oiled and it's been blended. You can see the two color tone here. We have red and magenta, and this is going to be our Chianti. So once it's been through the bins, it's been oiled, it's ready for the card. We load it up here, and the poundage is all set up into ratios. Depending on what color we're running, it'll have X% of red, X% of purple. And another thing to point out too is that with the scouring process, drying out the fiber, you have to make sure that the oil is uniformly spread out throughout the stock. Otherwise, you'll make an inconsistent weight when you get to the front of the card. And the staple length is also important as well. We run various lots of custom spun stuff, and the staple length refers to how long the fiber is. So as it's going through the card, you're trying to uniformly open the fiber up and make the fiber all the same uniform length. There's worsted mills that comb the wool, and then our mill that actually has worker cylinders opening up the fiber as it's going through. So it goes through 3 breakers, and it gets finer all the way through. And it basically, you come out with a very uniform material at the other end.
Right. One of the things that I've learned over the past is that with this wool, it's got very, very little like spikes on it, on the pieces. So what happens is when it gets pushed together, that's what's making your yarn or felting or things like that. So when you look at wool, really got to look closely because it's not just a single strand with no barbs on it or anything. It's actually got a lot of little connectors that make it turn into what it's going to turn into.
And we actually refer to that as veggie waste. So when the sheep gets into a kind of a rough, brambly pasture, you'll see a lot of domestic wolves having a lot of veggie waste in them. We get our wool from Australia and New Zealand. It tends to be cleaner pastures, less waste, so you don't have a lot of that veggie waste in our yarn. And the dusting process opens up the fiber, and a lot of that stuff drops out, you hope.
Yeah,
But some of it will make its way through the carding process. You hope most of it falls out.
Excellent. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, sure.
This is a huge machine. So tell me a little bit more about it, Nick.
Well, it looks kind of like something out of a Dr. Seuss book, the way the machinery goes together. But essentially, this is where the raw stock is first fed into the card. And you need to do it in a way that you're going to maintain a consistent weight throughout the card. That's determined by this hopper box here. And it's all set up with gears that the machine knows how much to put in there based on this small little system up here, whereas a teeny washer can actually make the difference between, you know, a certain grain yarn versus another. So you might add a half a washer or a quarter of a washer, and that can make a significant change in the amount of weight that you're actually going to feed into the machine.
Looks like it's going to empty out.
And there it goes, there it drops. So then you'll see that this arm here will move the stock forward in a consistent way. This part of the machine here will pat it down so it's fed into it in kind of a flatter way. And then it goes and it's fed into the machine, and you can see it going up through the workers on the first breaker right there. And that's where the carding actually takes place. So we just saw the first part of the card. There are three main cylinders on the card, and they're called breakers. The breakers surrounded by workers and strippers, and that's where actually the carding is taking place. Right here you'll see the first webbing being made down below. On this aluminum apron, it's fed down and channeled into kind of this ladder. The ladder consolidates the yarn, it brings it up above to the next breaker, up through here, and it's evenly distributed onto another set of a table. And this will bring this and distribute it along the table depending on what kind of weight you're running. He'll have the table running at a certain length. So this might be anywhere from 4 inches out the side of the table to 3 inches in, depending on what he's running. So you'll see that there's a lot of blending that's already taken place here just from the first cylinder. If you overblend it, you're not going to have that heathery look that we try to get. It's just enough with the 3 breakers to still maintain that heathery look that gives it the character that we want. So right here you'll see this is where the second and third breaker are, and that's when the wool is pretty well finished to become roving. So the breakers I referred to are right in here. They're the great big cylinders, surrounded by the workers, which are the smaller cylinders, and then the strippers, which are even the smaller cylinders. And right here you'll see the big motor that powers the entire card. This thing will run a piston that will turn, and it will operate every single little piece of machinery you see here. So all the moving parts are, this engine's responsible for all of them.
So this is the yarn right off the carding machine. And you were telling me that it's not really spun yet, so it doesn't have much strength.
It's not yarn quite yet. This is referred to as roping or roving. And what's happening at the end of the card here is it's starting to take on the character of yarn, but it hasn't been spun or drafted yet. So you can see in the sample that I have here, this is a part of what's happening. There's no at all.
Wow.
It's still just pretty much wrapped fleece. So once it's been spun and drafted, that's where it gets its strength. You can see in here, these are the rub aprons. And what's happening is it goes through a series of dividers, the yarn is separated, and then it's brought in through 2 sets of rub aprons, and it's actually rolled. So it has enough strength to be spun, but not enough strength to knit or weave. You could, a lot of people do actually knit and weave with pencil roving, but more people want it to be spun and drafted.
Now that explains it for me, because as a weaver, I wondered why mine wasn't as strong as regular yarn. So that's why, because it just hasn't been spun. Interesting, very interesting. Okay, so will this go from here to another area?
It'll go over the spinning frames. The weight tests are done from the start of the lot to the finish of the lot to be sure we're still maintaining an appropriate weight for whatever we're running. This happens to be a Chianti Shetland. So they'll do weight tests throughout as they're doffing the spools and taking them off and collecting them on the spool banks to be spun, just to make sure we're maintaining a consistent weight throughout.
Okay, great. So it will go from here. Are we going to see where it would go from here?
Yep, next we're about to see the spinning.
All right, excellent.
Okay, so we saw the carding process, and over here we have the spinning process. So once it's been carded into roving, we need to turn it into yarn. So the banks that you saw on the card are right up here now, and they're all being distributed into these frames. So the frames are set up with gear ratios to determine the draft. The draft will tell you how much stretch the yarn will have as it's being spun. The more draft you have, the stronger it's going to be. You've got a pressure point here and a pressure point here. And depending on the gear ratio, that will expand the wool out to make it to determine the draft. So once it's been brought through here, it goes down and to be collected onto these little bobbins. And there's a little traveler that you can't see because it's moving too fast. But that is going around there, and it's putting the yarn on there, and it's also creating the twist here. If an end drops while this is being done, it's collected on these little string rollers. And then it's collected there, and the spinner can identify a problem and come back and then splice a new set in. So depending on the weight of the yarn will determine the weight of the traveler. The weight of the traveler will also create some of the draft and how many turns per inch you're running. It really gives it the character of the yarn.
So Nick, this looks like a very thin yarn. Do they use that for making socks, or what would they use that kind of thing for?
This is a worsted weight. This happens to be our white Highland. So in the realm of yarn weights, it's on the heavier side. On the other side, we're running Shetland over here. And that's actually a finer weight yarn.
Yeah, you can see it's a little thinner.
So as long as you're running a consistent weight on both frames and you're running a consistent product, you could actually run 2 colors on one frame if they're the same weight. But since we have a heavier weight on one side and a lighter weight on the other, we have to separate them. Yeah, the old timers that ran the mill would laugh at us if they knew how small our lots were. Anything under 1,000 pounds back in the day was not considered worthwhile.
Right. So Nick, it looks like we're sort of to the end of this whole process, and along the way, we lost Jenna somewhere. I hope she's not in one of the carders.
In here.
Oh, she might be. Yeah. Hello, hello. So this has been great today. So we've got a few more things to talk about, and then we have the finished product. So tell me a little bit more about what we have here.
Okay, so once it comes off the frames, it's gathered into carts, into our stainless steel carts. And from there they go into the steamer that my grandfather built years back. It's very crude, it's very simple.
But it works.
There's an element in the back of it, and it has a water source, and that's all you need. An enclosed area with some pressure treated wood. All the stock that we've ever run through here has been through the steamer. Comes out, the stock comes out. It's essentially like setting your hair. You know, if you use a curling iron or straightening, you're setting the twist that's been maintained by the spinning frames.
Right.
So once you set the twist, the yarn is made.
Right.
When it comes out, it's dried, and then it's brought over to our twisting machine over here, and that's where the single ply becomes double ply, triple ply, quadruple ply, depending on what the product is.
Yep. Wow.
And once it's been plied, it's set up into these larger size bobbins, and then it's brought over to the skein winder, and we make skeins out of it for knitting, or we bring it over to the cone winder over there, which is good for weaving.
So how will they buy this finished product? Will they buy it just loose or in a ball, or do they
It'll come in skeins or cones, depending on your knitting or weaving.
What does a skein look like, and what does a cone look like, just so I can see the difference?
The skeins we all have hung to dry over here. And we can actually...
So a skein is just loose yarn that looks like it's kind of like an arm length, and it's just rolled, and people buy it that way.
And we actually have a skein twister as well that actually will kind of knot it in a nice way, and then we'll put a label on it as well.
Yep, I've seen those at the store. And then the other one is the cones, you said?
Yep.
And what is a cone? Is this, they wouldn't buy it on this?
Nope. Actually, we send a lot of our custom work out in the larger scale size bobbins. Everything generally is coned and then shipped out to our customers, or it goes to our store, and the weavers buy it in 1 pound cones.
Yep. Beautiful. So I think we'll probably take a quick stop off at the store just to show the line that you have, because it is absolutely beautiful. The colors, the textures, everything, it's spectacular. So, you know, as a weaver, it's got to be so hard to decide what you're going to go with, and I mean, there's so many things to think about.
Yeah, it's very difficult to have so many colors in our line and be a mill of our size. Keeping colors in stock is always constantly something we work to do.
Right.
It's very expensive to do, and we try to maintain as many of our colors as we can all the time, and that's the goal.
Right. Well, you want to keep everybody happy.
Exactly.
And keep them coming back. Yeah. So Nick, these are the skeins that you were talking about, and these have been through the washer?
Yep, that's right. The skeins are all washed. The cones aren't. The weavers don't want them washed.
Right.
The knitters do.
Right.
So we wash them all, and as you can see, the yarns has really bloomed at this point. The softer spun yarn blooms more than kind of the coarser spun yarn, and that will change the personality depending on what kind of a knitter you are and what kind of yarn you like.
So what helps it blossom? You were saying that it has to go into that washing machine over there that
You
you've
drop
washed.
it into that washing machine, and that washing machine has spun every single skein that we've ever produced. Well, not ever. It's been here for 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
But the thousands of skeins that have been through here, it's pretty impressive that little household washing machine's done it all.
That really is. That is. So you takes it out of the washer, you put it out here to dry, because we've got all these fans here, and then it ends up like this.
Sets on the drying rack until it's reached a certain amount of drying. It has to be dry enough to skein, because when it goes into plastic, it can sit there and sweat over time, and it could do damage to the wool. So you want it as dry as you can get it. And then it's wound into these skeins by a small little mechanized skein winder we have. It's labeled, and then it's ready to become someone's project.
Great. Well, this is part 1 of 2 parts for the Harrisville Design Spinning Mill. And we hope that you'll join us in the second half. So if you're interested in more information about In My Backyard, or would like to be a guest, or just have some suggestions, please email us. And our email address is inmybackyardch8@gmail.com. And I hope we see you back in my backyard, back in Harrisville with Nick, and he'll show us a little bit more about knitting and all the products that are available, yarns. There's so much more to know.
Looms.
Yes.
You see it all.
Yeah, great. So see you in my backyard.